Oh, okay.
Oh, we're ready.
Welcome to the Remnant by Reclaim 611 podcast. I'm Paula,
And I'm Carrie.
and today we have a very special guest. Her name is Bryn Stonehouse. Bryn is a licensed master social worker with the Regional Victims Crisis Center. She completed her bachelor's work in social work and sociology at Abilene Christian University, and she later completed her master's degree in social work at Abilene Christian University. She is currently completing her clinical hours towards her clinical social work license. So at Regional Victim Crisis Center, Bryn serves as the coordinator for local anti-trafficking coalition, as an advocate and case manager for victims of violent crimes, and she is a counselor. Outside of work, Bryn enjoys serving in the university ministry at her church, spending quality time with family, friends, and her two dogs, exploring coffee shops and restaurants, reading in her hammock, and traveling and running. Bryn, welcome to our
Wow.
podcast.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Do you get to do all those extracurricular with everything else you do?
I I get lucky. I work at a place that really prioritizes self care and taking the rest you need. So I'm really lucky to be able to have that time to do all the things I love and get refueled by.
That's so awesome. Well, anytime if I was in Abilene, I would join you at a new coffee shop because that is one of my favorite things to do too.
Got some good ones popping up. So
Awesome.
That's how Carrie and I met for the first time at a coffee shop.
Yep. All about my coffee shops. I wish there was more.
Right. So we normally start our podcast off with a story. And Carrie usually has a story about how she met our guest, right? But today we can't start out like that.
Storyless.
She doesn't
Paula?
have a story.
I don't. I get to start off brand new today.
She gets to start off brand new. So this is going to be a little different for us today. Carrie doesn't have a story. We are meeting Bryn for the first time today through a mutual friend of mine, through actually a classmate of mine. She suggested Bryn. So Bryn, we thank you for taking out time to talk to us. And so listeners, you may not know, the Regional Victim Crisis Center is in Abilene, Texas. Tell us a little bit about Abilene, Texas, first of all.
So Abilene is kind of considered in West Texas. It's kind of a small town city of about 100,000. It's very much a college town. We have 3 universities here, as well as some smaller colleges and technical colleges. And then we also have an Air Force base here. So we have quite a few active duty members and those that have served in our Air Force as well in our community. And so it's not big. It's not like DFW or Austin or any of that, but it's not small where you know every single person either. So it's grown a lot, and I love being a part of this community and all that it has to offer. And yeah, that's a little bit about Abilene.
Okay,
Cool.
cool. So tell us a little bit about the Regional Victim Crisis Center.
Yeah, so our agency has been around for about 40 years in this community, and we serve all victims of violent crime. So that may be child abuse, that may be sexual assault, domestic violence, human trafficking. And so we are here to provide prevention education, as well as crisis intervention and advocacy and case management for victims in our community. And then we also offer free counseling for these victims to process through trauma and really get that trauma-informed care that they need as a part of their healing journey. And so we collaborate with a lot of other agencies in our community, whether that's law enforcement or child protective services or our forensic nurses here. It's just a great team to be a part of, and we are happy to be serving in our community because we know it's a pretty big need right now.
Okay, you said something that caught my attention, forensic nurses.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the forensic nurses.
Yeah, so these are nurses. Often they have other full-time jobs where they're serving in the medical field, whether that's in the emergency room or pediatrics or whatever it might be. But they go through specialized training and then volunteer their time to do forensic medical exams for individuals who've been sexually assaulted or physically abused or strangled. And they're really there to be a part of the healing journey and collect evidence for the investigation, as well as connect these individuals to services in our community and then meet their immediate medical needs as a result of the trauma and victimization that they faced.
Yes, forensic nurses. They are great.
They are incredible. Yes, they do great work.
Yeah.
So you said that is a potential way which you may meet a victim through, an encounter that a forensic nurse has had. What are other ways? So hospitals and these type of things to connect to your services. But how else do people find out about you or connect with you? Is it after something has happened, or they just know about your resources? And then as far as crisis intervention, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so oftentimes the really hard thing about our agency is people don't find out about us until they need us. And oftentimes that's after something pretty terrible has happened. But like you said, we do get a lot of our referrals through our hospital. We are all trained certified victim advocates through the Texas Office of the Attorney General. And so we are the only ones allowed to go into a forensic exam to support a victim while that exam is going on, if that's something they would like. And so that's one of our main ways we get connected and share information with these victims. We also get referrals from our local child advocacy center. And so they are the ones that work primarily with kids and youth who have been victimized, and they complete the interviews with them. And then they work with families to connect them to the services they need. And so we'll get referrals from them. We've gotten referrals from law enforcement that maybe not through the Child Advocacy Center, but maybe they're working with an adult victim, or some of their advocates that are on staff at our police department are connecting individuals to us. We get referrals from other counseling agencies. We get referrals from the national hotlines and the state hotlines. And then we just have individuals who are just looking online and are able to find our website and get connected through that. And so they kind of just do a self-referral. And so we have a lot of avenues that we get referrals, but I think majority will probably come from our Child Advocacy Center as well as the hospital.
Wow. It feels like it's just kind of a theme, don't you think, Paula? Mm-hmm. Those we talk to, especially in the spaces, the referrals, hospitals, law enforcement, schools, probably counselors, other people, and just the importance of networking, just with your Children Advocacy Center, which are usually in most places, and most cities have some kind of advocacy center.
CPS.
CPS probably.
So, what's the age range that you all service?
Any and everybody.
Okay.
Oh, really?
So we work with people as young as 3 or 4 doing play therapy, and then we can work all the way up to somebody who is elderly and 80, 90, whoever it might be. We are able to serve all ages of victims.
That's really unique.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's one of the things I love about our agency is that there's not many restrictions on who we cannot serve. And so you just get a variety of populations and ages and socioeconomic statuses and things like that. That it's just great for our community too, because we're in a smaller community, so there's not always a ton of services. So just being able to serve anybody and everybody, it's great for our community, but it also helps us become better professionals too.
And you said, Brent, I think when Paula was reading your bio, that you specifically kind of work with the trafficking sector. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So tell me a little bit about, from your experience, how is that different, or what do you specifically do? Because it is different than sexual assault. This is a different class and a different kind of level of trauma a lot of times, and other, complex issues. So tell me a little bit about what you do and what's specific about your role.
Yeah, so I'll start. I kind of have 2 different roles. So I'll start first with our coalition. So we house at Regional Victim Crisis Center the Big Country Human Trafficking Coalition. And we're one of many coalitions across the state. And really what our main goal with this coalition is to bring key stakeholders together, those who might be encountering victims or serving them, and just really collaborate with everybody, because like you said, networking is very important and we cannot do this alone. And that's even more important when it comes to serving human trafficking survivors. And so we bring all these agencies together and community members together. And we really look at raising awareness in our community and educating our community, because, we're in small town, West Texas. And so most people are like, oh, that doesn't happen here. There's no human trafficking or things like that. And so really trying to address that stigma, as well as just educating our community as to what human trafficking really looks like in our state, in our city, in our nation, because oftentimes we think international, and the reality is that does happen internationally, but it's happening right here in our own backyard too. And so that's a really important goal of our coalition. And then we work with specific sectors. So we have working groups that are part of our coalition. So we have one that's focused on medical. We have one focused on housing, education and child welfare, mental health and substance use, faith-based working groups. And these are ones because I'm not involved in all of these things. I could not be any sort of medical professional. And so I'm not an expert, and they're the ones working in this area. And so it's really important that, we ask them, what are you guys seeing? What do you guys need? What would you like to see? How can we improve our services in this area? And so then from that collaboration, we're like, okay, what are our goals? And then we work to address them using evidence-based and trauma-informed strategies in our community. And so that's the coalition. I'm grateful to have that aspect, that macro work as a part of my career, and getting to network a lot and build a lot of really great relationships. And so that's the coalition.
We have there's a couple coalitions in the Metroplex, and I mean,
yes,
they're just kind of like your lifeline, right? Because so many people in different specialties, and they're running in different lanes, and you just need all of it. So that's awesome that you guys have that.
Yeah, I'm
okay,
really grateful.
I'm excited about hearing what else you do.
Yeah, so specific to RVCC, we work closely with the governor's child sex trafficking team. We fall in the West Texas region, so our administrators, Veronica Lowenberg, and we have a program that specifically focuses on case management and advocacy for minors and youth who have been trafficked. So our program focuses on ages 22 years and below. And really our goal with that program is we get referrals from whether it's DFPS or CAC or law enforcement, hospital, whatever it might be. And really we're just there to build relationships with these youth. The reality is a lot of them are going through the system, whether it's child welfare system, juvenile justice system, whatever it might be. And maybe they don't have supportive home lives, or, they have multiple other traumas in addition to being high risk for trafficking or have been trafficked. And when going through these systems and when getting the care that they need, they're seeing 15 million different people, and those 15 million different people might also change throughout the course that they're receiving those services. And so really our role is to be that one consistent person with them, who's constantly checking in that once they enter services, there's no you don't age out, you're here for as long as you need us, and we're going to be a part of your life as long as you want us to be and as long as you need us. And so it's really just providing that relationship building skills, those case management things of what services do they need, what goals do they have that they would like to achieve, and then really working with them through advocacy and providing them those referrals and services. And so that's our human trafficking program specific to RVCC.
Nice. So I have a question. Most people who get involved in human trafficking, they have a story or something that led them to it, or maybe a call. So what led you to working with victims of human trafficking?
Yeah, I feel like I probably don't have the typical story that most people probably have. So I came into college as a social work major. And originally I wanted to work with kids in a hospital setting. I had a cousin that was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and the social worker was incredibly impactful for them. And really helpful and beneficial for them through their journey in that. And so that's what I came in to do. And then I did a program through my college that actually had me in Dallas for my entire sophomore year. And I was working with an agency there called City Square, and they work with they work with individuals experiencing homelessness. And so I got involved with them, and so I really became passionate about homelessness. And then while I was also there, I was working with a reentry facility for those exiting incarceration and recovering from addiction. And so I became really passionate about that population. And and then at that time, I had a friend who was doing this program with me who was really passionate about human trafficking. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. Like, I fully support you and I care about this issue, but it's not something I'm like passionate about. So I'm going to focus on these things while I'm here. And then I came back to ACU. And from that experience, I was like, I don't want a field placement for my social work, like field hours that I had to get, where I was just going to sit and be doing paperwork or like making phone calls all day. I wanted something where I was actively engaging with individuals, which is how I ended up at RVCC, because it seemed to me the best opportunity to be able to do that. And so through that, I became passionate about sexual assault. And then I kind of just continued on into my role as the coalition coordinator for human trafficking. And so kind of falling into that, I was interested, I was like learning a lot, and just kind of through that, I've just slowly become very passionate about it. So it's not like I just kind of fell into it, but I am very passionate about it. But I don't have any like specific story of encountering a victim or knowing somebody or anything like that really piqued my interest. I just kind of fell into it. And
it doesn't really sound like it fell into it, though. Like, you were being prepared for it. Because if you talk about homelessness and you talk about, judicial system and substance abuse, like all of those things are involved in trafficking. So I don't think you fell in it, girl. I think you were being prepared for it, and then this is where, you are meant to be now. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it that way.
So with all of the awareness and education that you do for human trafficking and advocacy, when you are not on the clock, do you find yourself being more alert and attentive to things that you may suspect that looks like trafficking?
Yeah, I would definitely say I am, whether it's human trafficking or just like child abuse or anything like that in general. I pick up on red flags throughout the day, or like something that always gets me is like seeing social media posts where someone means really well, but like the information they're sharing is very inaccurate or something like that. And that will always like rile me up a little bit, because I'm like, no, like, I know you mean well, but like, please share accurate information on social media and things like that. So absolutely, yeah, I definitely am more aware. There's like places I drive by where I'm like, that looks a little sketchy. I could feel like some things might be going on there, like nail salons or something like that. But yeah, absolutely, definitely on more high of alert now that I know what to look for.
What are some of the challenges you face? Like you said, a lot of times in a smaller community, people don't believe that it's happening right there. So what are some of the challenges you face as you attempt to educate the community?
Yeah, so just the general challenge of, that doesn't happen here, which my response always is, I wouldn't have a job if it didn't happen here.
That's a good response.
So, so things like that. And then also like, just like I said, misconceptions, because we have human trafficking on pop culture, like the movie Trafficked and things like that, or just general things that they see online too that isn't accurate information. And so really addressing those barriers and those stereotypes, because while human trafficking does happen internationally, it can look very different than how it looks here. And so those are some challenges here. We also live in a very religious community. Mm-hmm. And so even talking about sex can be like instant barrier for some people, and a lot of concerns when it comes to that. And so that's something that we have to work through as well. And when it comes to talking about something like this, or just child abuse in general too. especially like in our schools and things like that, where we might get some parents or just community members who don't feel comfortable with us talking to students about this or even talking to them about it. And so that's another barrier that we've had to kind of face. And then also, like, on a professional level, some agencies who are like, this sounds great and I'm glad you're doing this, but I don't see how we fit into this puzzle. But reality is everybody fits into this puzzle somehow, or you have a daughter or a son or grandchildren or a cousin, whoever you might know that could benefit from this information too. And so really coming at it from that angle as well.
So question, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, so if you don't have something right now, it's cool. If you don't have like a story or something you're comfortable sharing, but just as you're saying that, you know, I'm sure you sometimes come back with stories as people are like, well, it doesn't happen here. Or, you know, like you said, a very, you know, spiritual or environment that you live in is because of the schools and everything like that. Like, do you ever have like stories of people you've encountered or victims that like, hey, no, really, let me tell you about this story because there was somebody I interacted with and this was her story and she lived here in Abilene or, you know, something like that. I don't know if you have something you're willing to share. Mm-hmm. I know sometimes confidentiality.
As far as like a victim or like when we go out to educate the community.
Well, either really, but maybe a victim story of somebody in your area just to kind of bring it home.
Yeah, absolutely. So one that kind of comes to mind is some things that we like to do and that we get to do in collaboration with some of our agencies in our community is present to kids who are aging out of foster care as part of kind of their skills building as well as education before that transition happens. And I think almost every single time that we've presented to them, they're like, oh yeah, that happened to my friend who was in foster care with me, or that, you know, that's happened to me. Or I had this guy approach me when I was on the street, you know, asking if I would do this, he would provide me like housing or food or something like that. And so the kids are very aware of this, even if, you know, we don't hear the stories or there's not some big news article about it. This is happening to our youth. This is happening a lot to our foster youth, and they're very high risk. And I can tell you every single time that we've talked to them, whether it's a group of 5 or like 25, one of them will always speak up and share, you know, hey, I had this experience when I was younger, or this is how I ended up in foster care. And so that's always really impactful to me. And their willingness to share is incredible. And I thank them for their courage in doing that. But also, like, these are the youth that can change our community. And we always tell them that, like, I can't be everywhere and anywhere all the time. They are the front lines. They know what's going on. They probably know more than what any adult knows going on. And so that's something we really like to emphasize with them too, that they're some of our greatest defenses against human trafficking. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
So yeah, I wanted to kind of piggyback off that question because I had a question that was kind of similar to it, Carrie.
Okay, sorry about that.
It's okay.
I just I got you to the punch kind of. You're probably going to ask it better anyway, Paula.
No,
so
I doubt it. I think you did great. I like that question. And so I was going to ask specifically, what does trafficking look like in a religious community, a smaller community, you know, a community that says it doesn't happen here? What does it look like there?
Yeah. So some things that we have seen specifically in our community, we see a lot of survival sex. And this has become a prominent issue with kids who are part of the LGBTQ community. And so survival sex is when an individual exchanges a sexual favor for basic needs, whether it's housing or food or school supplies or whatever it might be, anything of value. And so we have seen this a lot with youth in our community who are experiencing homelessness. And then we see it a lot with our kids who are LGBTQ, because sometimes they come out to their family and the family is not supportive whatsoever. And so they're kicked out of the home now they're homeless, and so they're just trying to meet their basic needs, and so they're exchanging these sexual favors to do that. And so that's something we have seen quite a bit. We also, unfortunately, see a lot of familial sex trafficking, where individuals, parents, caregivers, whoever it might be, are exploiting their children, whether that's for drugs or money or anything like that, anything of value, again. We have seen quite a bit in our community. We've seen gang-related and encountered some victims who were initiated into a gang and were exploited through that, or that's how the gang gets a lot of their profit, is by exploiting women and violence against women. And so that's something we've seen in our community. And then something just to be aware of in our community is that we have a major highway that runs right through our town. We have I-20 that runs right through Abilene. And then we also have some other smaller major highways that also run into our community or travel through our community. And that's another big thing where we've seen victims being transported through Abilene, or being like stopping in Abilene kind of as a pit stop. And so that's something that we've seen pretty frequently as well in our community.
Wow. I was just thinking about my lecture last night, actually, when you were mentioning that, because in the LGBTQ, and I kind of addressed that, there's some statistics that they're 2 times at risk for being homeless and 5 times more at risk for being trafficked, that particular community. And so it's interesting and eye-opening that you mentioned that. And then obviously foster care system, that vulnerability. And what was the last thing you said?
Gang-related.
Oh, gang-related.
Or survival sex.
Yes.
Familial sex trafficking and gang-related.
I'm so glad you defined survival sex, because
Yeah.
I don't really think people understand that. I usually stop to explain it as well. Just that it's literally survival. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, if you don't have a job and you don't have support, and like what you have your body, you know, and a lot of them have been trained that like they've been abused, other things in the past, so why not use what I have? And this has happened to me before, so it's the next natural thing to do. Mm-hmm. So anyway, man, you brought up a lot of good points.
Yeah, definitely. So having this conversation, a lot of times we think that it's really only related to females.
Mm-hmm.
Do you all see
Good point.
males that are victims of sexual assault or trafficking or things like that?
Yeah. So we have many males that are referred to our agency, whether that's for sexual assault or whatever victimization it might be. But we do see male victims of sex trafficking. We recently had a case kind of in our area, but outside of Abilene, where a man was arrested for essentially these boys were being trafficked through survival sex. And so he was bringing in these young boys and supplying them drugs and housing and transportation. And eventually he was finally caught for trafficking these young males. And so it's absolutely happening here. That's another bias we have to address, because we often think male perpetrator, female victim. And the reality is that's not the case. It's also really important to address that bias on our own as professionals too, because sometimes we get stuck in that mindset as well, especially if we're primarily working with female victims. Yeah. But also just the importance of knowing, like, hey, the reality is that's not the case. We also know that there's a lot of stigma and a lot of shame surrounding a male victim, saying, hey, I've been victimized. And also the importance of believing them too, because oftentimes the first time they tell it, whoever it might be doesn't believe them or shames them for it. And so that's really important to know, and to know that, there's not many services in our state, in our community, let alone our nation, targeting specifically males who've been exploited. Mm-hmm. And so that's also really important to know when it comes to, as a professional, working with these victims.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the topics you've brought up. I think we haven't talked a lot about male victims, right. And I think there's some stats that are like 20% are actually estimated to be male. You know?
It's I've seen different ones. I've seen some even estimate it's 50-50.
Oh,
Wow.
It just kind of depends on the studies you look at. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Well, and it's just like, I mean, statistics are so hard anyway because this is like a crime. And like, what great statistics do you have on crimes as big as this? So statistics are very hard, but yeah, it's definitely higher than I think we think. There was actually a speaker, and I think I was in Abilene when I listened to this speaker. There was a conference, I think it was Abilene, but anyway, he was talking about, he runs a program in, I believe, San Antonio, and the first year or two that they opened up, like 40% of their adolescents, and it was for adolescents, was male. And I remember being really shocked by that just because I don't personally see that as much. And I think you do have to check your own bias. But I do agree. Maybe, you're probably more accurate. Maybe it is more like 50%. Who knows?
Yeah, I believe that was it RIMA, Roy Mass Youth program in San Antonio?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and I know there's now a place in Denton that's opening. That's like the first, possibly the first in our nation, specifically focused on male victims and males that have been exploited.
Really?
So we're really excited about that. Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but
that's okay. That's why we have Google.
Yes.
all right. Well, Bryn, we definitely thank you for taking time to talk to us and share information about the Regional Victim Crisis Center and everything that you do. You guys are doing some amazing work, and we are just glad to know that the work is going on in other areas, and you all have been around for over 40 years, so that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah. So I almost kind of wonder, when did the trafficking piece become, a part of it as...
Yeah. So our program, so we started the coalition back in 2016, and then we received our first grant for our advocacy and case management program back in 2019. So that's when our program officially launched with advocacy and case management for youth who've been exploited.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I love that you're working with the governor's office. We actually had Tommy Grover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we love her.
Yes. I know she's not your regional director, but yeah, I figured you knew her. She's awesome. So it's really encouraging that you guys are part of that program, and how effective it's being. Do you have anything, Bryn, here, not to throw you under the bus, do you have anything else you got an audience here that you would like to share that you feel like is important for people to know, or a myth you want to bust, or anything?
Yeah, my biggest thing when it comes to tackling this issue in our communities is that while we have professionals that are addressing this issue, like I said, we can't be everywhere and know anything all the time. It really takes our teachers, and it takes our parents, and those that are interacting with youth every single day, to really be the frontline workers, the ones that are noticing red flags, making the reports, or even offering up prevention opportunities to talk with these youth, talk with parents, talk with staff members, whatever it might be. The reality is we can't do this just by ourselves, whether that's just at my agency or all the agencies here in Abilene or in your community. We need you too. We need you in this fight. We need you to be eyes and ears and advocates, in whatever capacity that might be, whether that's with your kids, whether it's with your grandchildren, cousins, you're a teacher and the students you work with, or an administrator in schools with the students you work with, or just whoever it might be. If you see something, say something. And even if you're like, I have no idea what I just saw, or I feel like I'm wrong, and I'd rather you be wrong than you to be right and not have it reported. And so that's what I always like to emphasize. Like, we can't do this without you. You guys are the front lines. And you can make a difference in at least one person's life, just by sticking up and for advocating for them.
Thank you, Bryn. That was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like feeling empowered listening to you. Yes, yes.
Yes. Can you give us information about the website? Maybe somebody might want to check it out and find out more information about you all.
Yeah, so we are actually revamping our website right now, but we do have it out there. It's regionalvictimcrisiscenter.org. We're in Abilene, Texas. You can also find our agency on Facebook, whether that is the Big Country Human Trafficking Coalition, and the RVCC Regional Victim Crisis Center also has our own Facebook page, so you can stay up to date on activities or events that we're hosting, prevention trainings we're providing online, and things like that. So we would love to interact with you. We'd love to connect with you and tell you about our agency.
That's awesome. Well, Bryn, once again, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking out time and just educating us and sharing your knowledge and your experiences with our listeners. So I am Paula.
And I'm Carrie.
And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email us at
support@reclaim611.org, or you can visit us at www.reclaim611.org.
All right, guys, we thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Bryn.
Thank you, Bryn.
We are going to say goodbye for now, but don't forget to step into the fight.
That's right.
Bye-bye.